Hi again. Dorothy Sayers, Creed or Chaos, in the essay Why Work, page 55 of Creed or Chaos. She is now talking about the different views of work, different than the one we all absorb from the culture around us, that work is what you do to get money to do other things. Now she goes into the consequences of another view in greater detail. She says there is, for instance, the question of profits and remuneration. We have all got it fixed in our heads that the proper end of work is to be paid for, to produce a return in profits or payment to the worker which fully or more than compensates the effort he puts into it. But if our proposition is true, this does not follow at all. So long as society provides the worker with a sufficient return in real wealth to enable him to carry on the work properly, then he has his reward. For his work is the measure of his life, and his satisfaction is found in the fulfillment of his own nature, and in contemplation of the perfection of his work. That, in practice, there is this satisfaction is shown by the mere fact that a man will put loving labor into some hobby which can never bring him in any economically adequate return. His satisfaction comes in the godlike manner from looking upon what he has made and finding it very good. He's no longer bargaining with his work, but serving it. It is only when work has to be looked on as a means to gain that it becomes hateful. For then, instead of a friend, it becomes an enemy, from whom tolls and contributions have to be extracted. What most of us demand from society is that we should always get out of it a little more than the value of the labor we give to it. By this process, we persuade ourselves that society is always in our debt, a conviction that not only piles up actual financial burdens, but leaves us with a grudge against society. Here's the second consequence. At present, we have no clear grasp of the principle that every man should do the work for which he is fitted by nature. The employer is obsessed by the notion that he must find cheap labor, and the worker by the notion that the best paid job is the job for him. Only feebly, inadequately, and spasmodically do we ever attempt to tackle the problem from the other end and inquire, what type of worker is suited to this type of work? People engaged in education see clearly that this is the right end to start from, but they are frustrated by economic pressure, and by the failure of parents on the one hand and employers on the other to grasp the fundamental importance of this approach, and that the trouble results far more from a failure of intelligence than from economic necessity is seen clearly under war conditions when, though competitive economics are no longer a governing factor, the right men and women are still persistently thrust into the wrong jobs through sheer inability on everybody's part to imagine a purely vocational approach to the business of fitting together the worker and his work. A third consequence is that if we really believed this proposition and arranged our work and our standard of values accordingly, we should no longer think of work as something that we hasten to get through in order to enjoy our leisure. We should look on our leisure as the period of changed rhythm that refreshed us for the delightful purpose of getting on with our work. And this being so, we should tolerate no regulations of any sort that prevented us from working as long as and as well as our enjoyment of work demanded. We should resent any such restrictions as a monstrous interference with the liberty of the subject. How great an upheaval of our ideas that would mean, I leave you to imagine. It would turn topsy-turvy all our notions about hours of work, rates of work, unfair competition, and all the rest of it. We should all find ourselves fighting, as now only artists and the members of certain professions fight, for precious time in which to get on with the job, instead of fighting for precious hours saved from the job. A fourth consequence is that we should fight tooth and nail, not for mere employment, but for the quality of the work that we had to do. We should clamor to be engaged on work that was worth doing and in which we could take a pride. The worker would demand that the stuff he helped to turn out should be good stuff. He would no longer be content to take the cash and let the credit go. Like the shareholders in the brewery, he would feel a sense of personal responsibility and clamor to know and to control what went into the beer he brewed. There would be protests and strikes, not only about pay and conditions, but about the quality of the work demanded and the honesty, beauty, and usefulness of the goods produced. The greatest insult which a commercial age has offered to the worker has been to rob him of all interest in the end product of the work and to force him to dedicate his life to making badly things which were not worth making. This first proposition chiefly concerns the worker as such. My second proposition directly concerns Christians as such, and it is this: it is the business of the church to recognize that the secular vocation as such is sacred. Christian people, and particularly perhaps the Christian clergy, must get it firmly into their heads that when a man or woman is called to a particular job of secular work, that is as true a vocation as though he or she were called to a specifically religious work. The church must concern herself not only with such questions as the just price and proper working conditions, she must concern herself with saying that the work itself is such as a human being can perform without degradation, that no one is required by economic or any other considerations to devote himself to work that is contemptible, soul-destroying, or harmful. It is not right for her to acquiesce in the notion that a man's life is divided into the time he spends on his work and the time he spends in serving God. He must be able to serve God in his work, and the work itself must be accepted and respected as the medium of divine creation. I wanted to attach a link to James Orr's discussion of what does the image of God in man really mean.